Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in our summer series, THC and Youth Mental Health, What Parents and Trusted Adults Need to Know. My name is Julie Dreifault, and I am the National Director of Community Engagement for One Chance to Grow Up. I want to thank you so much for investing your time with us today. Whether you are a parent, an educator, trusted adult, healthcare provider, or policymaker, your presence here shows a shared commitment to a very simple and grounding truth. Our children only have one chance to grow up, and today's high potency THC can affect their potential. These products looked and act differently than the plant of the past, presenting serious risk to a youth's developing brain. Our goal today is to empower you with the facts so you can have conversations with the young people in your life. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Please drop your questions or thoughts into the Q&A box at any time, as we will have a few minutes at the end of the presentation for that. And know that this will be available on Friday on our YouTube channel, so please share it widely with your networks. I want to begin with a short clip from Dr. Libby Stout, a board-certified addiction psychiatrist who has worked in the addiction and behavioral health field since 1990. She is an internationally recognized expert on the unintended consequences of commercialized marijuana, among many things, and she focuses primarily on the potentially devastating effects of high-potency THC on the developing brain.
My name is Libby Stout. I'm an MD and a psychiatrist. I have a great deal of experience working with hundreds of patients. Many people do believe that cannabis or marijuana is natural, so it must be safe. The old-time marijuana that was very low in THC was the natural plant. But now we have these concentrates which are made from things like solvents, like butane and propane, to isolate the THC. And that is not natural. Always up until the 1980s, 90s, it was 2 to 3% THC. But now we have really high potent products. They're made in forms that look like just like everything else we love, like brownies and candy, gummies. Then you can get vapes, oil that's been isolated using solvents, and it can be very high potency THC. So you can get vapes with 70%, 60%, maybe even up to 90%. Many of these products allow for much more frequent use. Kids can have those in school and use them in school without anybody knowing. So they're taking hits on a regular basis. If you're using anything greater than 10% THC and using it regularly, you are at great risk for developing problems with addiction to cannabis, psychosis, cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, suicide, and other mental health problems. Most people do not think cannabis is addictive. However, the new high-potency THC products are extremely addictive. So if you try it initially, yes, it might help with your sleep. And yes, it might help with your anxiety. But if you use it regularly, then you can develop addiction to it. And this is what we're calling Cannabis Use Disorder, meaning that you really can't stop. And then you find that you have worse anxiety and worse sleep. Because when you become addicted to something, withdrawal is the exact opposite of what it did for you. So if you're using before the age of 21, then you have like more of a 5 to 7 times increased risk of developing addiction to cannabis. So one of the risks of the high potency products, especially regular use, is going to be psychosis. They start having hallucinations, meaning they're hearing things that nobody else is hearing, they're seeing things that nobody else is seeing. The problem with the high potency THC, especially using it frequently, is that psychosis may not go away and can continue and worsen. If the symptoms continue, it turns into a diagnosis of schizophrenia, which is a lifelong diagnosis. It's a very disturbing diagnosis because it's very hard to treat. And one of the problems that we're having with the high-potency THC is that studies around the world are showing that the highest conversion rate from psychosis to schizophrenia is with cannabis. What we were seeing now, and this is primarily with the high-potency THC and the increased frequency, people having severe nausea and vomiting that they can't stop, and severe abdominal pain. When you vomit enough that you can't stop and you keep vomiting and you empty all your electrolytes, then that will basically kill your kidneys. And it can cause heart arrhythmias. So when people are using this for their mental health, they think it's going to help with their depression. They need to recognize that it's not going to help. It's going to make things worse. And what we're seeing is this increased risk of suicide, especially in young people. In Colorado, THC is the #1 drug found in toxicology of teens who die by suicide. There is definitely research now demonstrating that one of the highest risk factors for developing opiate use disorder is using cannabis before the age of 18. And so this is just showing that it kind of like primes the brain. That is something people need to recognize, they need to be warned about.
We will hear from Dr. Stout throughout today's presentation, and I'm happy to let you know that she has joined our call for questions later on today. So really quickly, who is One Chance? We have been at the table since marijuana commercialization first launched in Colorado in 2012. We were the first state in the nation to create this new commercialized innovative market through Amendment 64. Our founders sat as stakeholders on the implementation task force where they watched something highly concerning unfold. Consumer ease was the #1 priority, while youth safety and health was ranked dead last. Somehow that did not sit well with us. Our mandate and mission were set, and we have been the voice standing up for kids since then. Today, we are a national, nonpartisan nonprofit with trusted matter subject experts advocating for youth protections through transparency, education, and robust policy work. Driven by our current opiate abatement efforts, we've engaged in a dedicated partnership across the Pikes Peak region, specifically doing intensive work in El Paso and Teller counties. Our goal for this webinar today is to empower you wherever you are with current prevention tools and science-backed resources to help you start honest conversations for the kids in your life. So commercialization. Marijuana was commercialized on January 1st, 2014 in Colorado, and the market since then has undergone a rapid potency arms race. Driven by commercial incentives to engineer higher and higher potencies, average THC concentrates have surged. While the marijuana of decades ago typically contained 3 to 5%, today's retail market is dominated by the concentrates, representing that 800% increase in potency, which is a dangerous trend playing out in all states that are legalizing cannabis. And like Libby said, did you know, she said anything over 10% was considered high potency THC. 93% of the products sold in Colorado, Washington, or Oregon, which are the most established markets in our country, are over 15%. First, I do want to share some good news. Due to the extensive work of One Chance to Grow Up and many, many dedicated prevention and public health organizations and professionals, U.S. overall youth THC rates have seen recent drops. However, which correlates to the bad news, the high school students who do consume are increasingly shifting to these high THC concentrates, leaving them exposed to those normalization and the dangerous detriments of these industrial strength intoxicants. We'll hear from Dr. Stout again.
So back then in the early 90s, what I was treating mostly were people with problems with alcohol, methamphetamine, cocaine, or heroin. And yes, we did see people that were using marijuana, but it was I mean, they were using it as a companion drug. It was never a problem that I saw. And I saw the problem was mainly with tobacco because they were, chain smoking tobacco and using marijuana occasionally when, of course, back then it was pretty low potency.
So Dr. Stout confirms this is no longer the marijuana of the 1990s. THC potency has changed. Several clinicians call addiction a pediatric onset disease, as roughly 90% of all adults struggling with addiction started using substances before age 18. And another data point, nearly 55% of youth who enter substance use treatment programs seek help for marijuana, making it the most common drug for which teenagers receive formal addiction treatment in the United States. Today's marijuana products are designed for use in almost every conceivable way, head to toe. Many are discreet, they're difficult to identify, and easy to hide, making this particularly concerning for youth, teachers, and parents. Kids deserve facts, not marketing. The ultimate marketing magic trick, in my opinion, is the word natural. Somewhere along the line, we were all convinced that if an intoxicant starts as a plant, it must be safe. It sounds nice, it sounds healthy, but let's look at the facts. Just like a strawberry is very different than a frosted strawberry Pop Tart, the same goes for today's retail THC. This is not the plant. This is now bioengineered, high potent products designed for maximum intoxication. Kids are also hearing messages like, hey, it helps with my anxiety. It makes me focus with school. I need it to sleep. It must be safe. It is medicine, you know. These messages are not just coming from the kids at their school and in their community. They hear it from social media, music, influencers, other adults in their life, pop culture, and even therapists. But the science tells a very different story. For developing adolescents' brains, frequent use of today's high THC potency doesn't just cure these struggles, it can actually contribute to a deeper depression. It can worsen baseline anxiety and cause school performance to drop. And the industry has marketed this THC as both recreation and medicine, by the way, with zero FDA approval. I think we would question that with almost any other intoxicating substance. Take 2 shots of Fireball and call me in the morning? I don't think so. We also have to look at the outdated myth that marijuana isn't addictive. Neurobiology is very clear. THC can create a rapid pathway towards physical and psychological dependence. And if you've ever heard me speak before, and is a very important word in my life, because it means there's good news. Parents and trusted adults remain the most powerful protective factor in a child's life. When we talk to our kids openly and provide them with the science and the facts, they listen. I do want to let you know that this is a handout that's available online, and we'd love for you to download it and use it in any way that you seem fit. Let's look at how the chemicals can actually impact the adolescent brain. So right now, our kids are being flooded with ads from beautiful, quote, trusted influencers on social media, claiming today's products are natural, they're plant-based, and actually they're part of a wellness routine. It kind of sounds healthy, like a smoothie for your brain, right? Well, you're not going to hear the real science on TikTok. The truth is, the adolescent brain is already a perfectly balanced chemical factory. Most brains don't need any external additives to function beautifully, and when added, they can cause acute and sometimes permanent issues. First up is dopamine. Dopamine is a molecule of more. This is a brain chemical designed to reward life-sustaining behaviors like eating, learning, sleep, pleasure. When intoxicants, and especially high-potency THC, flood the brain with dopamine levels far beyond what nature intended, a reward deficit is created. So natural joys like a sunset, a first kiss, or a good grade feel dull because the brain has been rewired to only respond to that massive surge from the substance and experience decreased motivation as well. Serotonin, it regulates mood, sleep, emotional stability, and high THC targets these receptors, which are crucial for brain wiring and emotional regulation. This disruption alters serotonin activity, leading to decreased levels of serotonin, which significantly increases long-term risks for depression, anxiety, and altered cognitive development. So if these pathways are artificially stimulated with THC during that sensitive window of adolescence, the brain may struggle to naturally regulate mood now, but also later in life. This interference may be the primary driver behind the cannabis-induced psychosis and severe depression and anxiety we see in youth using these high-potent products. Then there is oxytocin. That is a bonding hormone that helps us feel connected to our parents, our dogs, our friends, our community. Healthy child and teen development absolutely requires this human social bonding. However, when a kid begins bonding with a substance or the drug culture that is surrounding it, the substance begins to replace needed human connection. Sometimes the industry markets substances as social lubricants, but pharmacologically, regular use can actually lead to social withdrawal, an inability to form deep bonds without the drug present, and also can increase social anxiety into adulthood. And finally, endorphins. These are the body's natural morphine released during exercise, stress, laughter. Think of the runner's high we hear about. Intoxicating substances, particularly opioids, kratom, and high-dose THC, mimic or force the release of these chemicals. Over time, the brain stops producing its own endorphins, leading to an inability to handle emotional or physical stress and creating a physical need for just the substance to be available. The next several slides will discuss suicide, substance use, addiction, and mental health, so please step away if you need to.
What I hope most parents are learning that they may not know is that the brain is still developing as humans. Many animals, their brain is fully developed the minute they're born, but that's not true for us. And our brain is not fully developed until the mid-20s. And there are a lot of things happening in the brain at that time. And what we're learning is that the endocannabinoid system plays a really big role in brain development. Now, some people may think that, oh, well, that means you're supposed to smoke cannabis, which is absolutely wrong because cannabis it can totally disrupt what is supposed to be happening. Because when you're born with a certain number of neurons. When you're a child, these neurons dramatically increase. And then during puberty, the brain is charged with determining what are we keeping and what are we getting rid of. And so they actually strengthen some neurons by myelinating them. And then they prune other neurons because they're causing interference. And it's the brain's decision to do that. And there are actually two receptors responsible for that. One is the cannabinoid 1 receptor, which is a CB1 receptor, and the other one is a nicotinic cholinergic neuron. And that's not called nicotinic because we're supposed to smoke tobacco. It's just because nicotine works on those receptors. And so those two receptors make the decision about what are we pruning. That's why I do believe that the two drugs absolutely teenagers should not be using are tobacco and cannabis because it can really interfere with this fine tuning of brain development. And I think that's why we're seeing so many problems with things like low IQ in kids that are using, increased risk of psychosis, increased risk of mental health problems in general, increased risk of suicide. And so these are really important things that parents need to understand, that that's why we don't want kids using, especially the high potency products, because the higher the potency, the faster somebody is going to become addicted to something. And when you're addicted, it's very hard to quit.
The adolescent brain is very different than that of an adult. My takeaways from that, thank you, Libby. When a young person introduces these high potency TH products into that really crucial active developmental window in their brain, it really acts as a massive disruptor of how things should develop. Wow. Why does this matter? Sammy, Levi, Randy, Johnny, Diego. Marijuana can change the brain. If you take nothing else away today, please remember those 5 words and remember these 5 names. Incredible young men who are no longer alive as THC hijacked their beautiful brains. As Libby told us, the adolescent brain is still under construction, meaning heavy THC or long-term THC use can disrupt that prefrontal cortex, that area responsible for judgment, planning, self-control, decision-making, all key executive functioning skills that are needed for success in life. We owe it to our kids to ensure every adult in their life has their back and understands these risks we are discussing today. So again, I thank you for being here. Substance use disorder is a complex brain condition where a person continues to use a substance, whether it's alcohol, nicotine, drugs, despite it causing significant harm to their health, their social life, their family life, or to their work. It is defined by a lack of control over use and a shift in brain chemistry that prioritizes a substance over most normal life functions. SUDs can range from mild to severe, with addiction being the most chronic and severe form of the disorder. Cannabis use disorder is a specific kind of SUD defined by the inability to stop using marijuana, even though it is causing physical or psychological problems. And with the rise of these high potent products, clinicians are seeing an increase in CUD, particularly among our kids.
Well, I think the biggest challenge people face is the potency of the drug that they're using. When you're using a higher potency drug, you're more likely to be strongly addicted to it and having horrible withdrawal. And it's the withdrawal that keeps people using. And that's what gets people not wanting to go to treatment because they're afraid that they won't be able to stop. And if they do, then they'll be miserable. What I'm finding is that people, especially young people, who are vaping or dabbing high potency THC, they really can't stop because the withdrawal is so uncomfortable. And we don't have anything to use for that right now because there's no pharmaceutical drug that can be helpful, like with opiates. We have things like methadone, buprenorphine that can really help people in the withdrawal process. And we have medications for people coming off of alcohol, but we do not have anything for high potency THC. And people just have to stop, and it's miserable. And that's why I think we see a lot of young people, especially, continuing to use.
So these THC products are engineered to be highly concentrated and they can rapidly trigger that strong physical and psychological dependence, trapping the user in that cycle of consuming the drug just to stop the painful symptoms of withdrawal. And again, there's that word and, there is a lot of evidence-based hope. Proven interventions such as cognitive behavioral therapy and specialized treatment centers that are equipped to recognize THC addiction often offer successful pathways to recovery. Anyone hear this? Sometimes it's called the disorder of marijuana commercialization, characterized by recurrent vomiting episodes in chronic marijuana users of particularly high potency, but not always. It's classically relieved by hot showers, but so hot that actually people come into the emergency department with second-degree burns. Vomiting episodes are typically associated with screaming during vomiting bouts that led to the term scromiting. I heard a doctor played that for me a couple summers ago, and I will never forget the sound. She said she used to hear that noise in her ER once or twice a month, and now she sees it multiple times every shift. It can be very expensive to evaluate because patients often need labs and CT scans, admissions, endoscopies, and colonoscopies. Sadly, it does not respond to typical anti-nausea medication, and the only cure is stopping all THC, and it often takes 4 to 6 months for symptoms to stop. And this stopping means permanent, forever, as their bodies can no longer tolerate any amount of THC, whether it comes from hemp, or the marijuana plant. Dr. Stout said earlier today that CHS isn't just about the severe discomfort. Multiple published case reports show that extreme fluid loss from that vomiting can lead to fatal complications, severe electrolyte imbalances, kidney failure, and cardiac abnormalities. When an adolescent consumes high-potency THC, the brain can experience acute psychiatric distress that goes far beyond a temporary high. One of the most critical conditions we need to recognize today is cannabis-induced psychosis, or CIP. When a young person enters an active episode of CIP, they undergo an intense, frightening break from reality. And I want to quickly highlight a few of the key symptoms. First, profound distortion of time and distance, where their basic environment tracking is completely altered. Second, they can develop delusions, which are fixed, unshakable beliefs in things that are fundamentally not true. They may experience massive spikes in anxiety, panic, and paranoia. And fourth, they may experience true hallucinations where they begin seeing things, hearing things, feeling things that don't exist. And they may experience that derealization and depersonalization, a deeply terrifying state where they feel like they themselves are not real or that the situation around them is not actually happening. As parents and trusted adults, we have to understand this is not a teenager just having a bad trip or being dramatic. This is a severe acute medical condition caused by that massive stimulation of their developing brain's chemistry. And a recent study has come out. A single psychotic episode from these products is associated with a 47% probability of a young person developing bipolar or schizophrenia later in life. So learning to spot these mechanics early is really an urgent matter of public health. The prodromal, or the early stage of psychosis, can last for months or even years and often resembles a typical teenager struggling rather than acute psychiatric emergency. So be aware, during this critical period, the developing brain may begin to misinterpret reality. It can cause a parent's care to look like control or an adult's concern in a child's life to feel like a direct threat. Once full psychosis takes hold, a young person's self insight is often completely lost, which forces family into reactive, crisis driven interventions. But there is power in early action. If we can recognize these behavioral shifts early, the brain is still highly reachable, making upstream prevention, recovery, and resolution entirely possible. Dr. Stout spoke on this a little bit, but I wanted to show you the data point. This is sobering. Ever since commercialization in 2014, THC has been, and each year remains the #1 substance found in Colorado completed suicides for 10 to 18-year-olds. According to Colorado public findings, youth cannabis consumption is strongly associated with a higher likelihood of experiencing suicidal thoughts or attempting suicide compared to those that do not use. One Chance drove a massive consumer safety policy victory in Colorado by helping pass House Bill 21-1317. This law created a landmark 4-page consumer handout required at the point of purchase, and it was the first tangible resource explicitly designed to warn about high THC potency and the risks associated with it. As you can see, these are significant psychotic symptoms, mental health issues, including depression and anxiety, cannabinoid hyperemesis, and cannabis use disorder. While One Chance often, all the time, raises concerns about the impacts of high potency THC on our youth, you need to understand that we are not the only ones sounding the alarm and how this is impacting our kids. This data from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment reveals the heavy toll. Adolescent use significantly increases the risk of addiction, high school and college dropout rates, and a future pipeline to other high-risk illicit substances. And most alarming, maybe what we've just talked about, is that link to severe psychiatric crisis. So today's concentrates could potentially derail a young person's life, again, making that conversation earlier and early very necessary for our communities. Okay, gateway can be a polarizing word or phrase, but I want to clarify what I mean today. The definition of gateway is a means to an end, is a means or access point. Our daughter lived in Vancouver last year, and I crossed the Canadian-US border multiple times to visit her. There was a gateway town, a place where I began my journey into Canada. Marijuana fits that definition, a place where kids begin their substance journey. And for the large majority of teens, this begins with alcohol, marijuana, and/or nicotine. As Dr. Libby Stout shared with me recently, there is no level of THC that is safe for the developing brain. Younger people are more vulnerable to harm, which eventually can include opiate misuse. Okay, I've shared a lot of what some people may call scary science the last several minutes, but these are not scare tactics. These are documented potential outcomes we know can occur when the adolescent brain is exposed to THC. Public health data consistently points to 3 factors that can increase these risks: starting young, using more frequently, and using the high-potency THC products. That does not mean that every young person who uses marijuana will experience these outcomes, but the body of science is rapidly growing that shows that the developing brain is different. It's more vulnerable, and for some youth, the consequences can be significant. And think about it, adolescence, again, Libby defined by the mid-20s, it's a critical window where young people are making life-shaping decisions. Their education, their careers, relationships, employment, military service, financial choices, and family planning. Protecting that developing brain during this time helps preserve the ability to make clear decisions, pursue long-term goals, and create a better and happier life for these people. HighRiskTHC.org is a dedicated public health education campaign that provides research-backed information on modern THC products. Our goal is simple. We are here to empower you, to help you keep lines of communication open, to have the science, to highlight healthy alternatives, to educate others in your community, and to protect the kids in your life. As we wrap up today's webinar, please find a few more evidence-based resources I pulled specifically for you. We know that navigating today's high THC can feel overwhelming, but you do not have to do it alone. Our toolkit, newsletters, and digital resources are designed to give you the words and the science you need to educate. Protecting our kids requires intentional action right in our neighborhoods. It will start with the conversation at your dinner table, but it must expand to how we can engage schools, neighbors, faith and community leaders, our politicians to help or keep our kids safe. The partnership we have with you today is proof of what happens when we refuse to stand on the sidelines. Take these resources, talk today, build that network of upstream prevention. Our kids get one chance to grow up healthy, safe, and empowered. Thank you for your time. So what can you do? Stay tuned for more in our summer THC series. Use this QR code to link to our website. Sign up for a newsletter, and we send out alerts for THC decisions that are being made in your neighborhood and your community. And please reach out to me with questions, ideas, or anything you would like to discuss.